Hello! Welcome to Slate Money, your guide to the business and finance news of the week. I'm Felix Hammond of Axios with Emily Peck of Axios.
Hi.
With Elizabeth Spires of the New York Times and places.
Hello.
And we have a tech-heavy show this week with none other than Alex Kantrowitz. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Alex, we came on your show, and in penance, we are having you on ours. What is the name of your show, and who are you?
It's called Big Technology Podcast, and I am a tech reporter. Every week we do two shows. One, a flagship interview talking about big ideas in tech, which is the one you were on. And then on Fridays, we break down the week's news, all the big stories of the week.
So check out Big Technology, but check it out after you listen to this, because this is a great show. We're going to talk about all manner of AI tech stuff. We're going to talk about Nvidia, how much it's earning, whether it's a monopoly, whether it's good that it's a monopoly, whether it's a good monopoly. We're going to talk about Sam Altman, how aggressive he is, how truthful he is. We're going to talk about WhatsApp and voice memos. Alex and I are somehow going to get into a bet about messaging. We have a Slate Plus segment on Trumpy TikToks. It's all coming up on Slate Money.
What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
Okay, so Alex, at the end of last week's Slate Money, I teased this segment by mentioning that Nvidia, I mentioned in the numbers round, that Nvidia is worth $2.6 trillion. Its most recent quarterly earnings showed a net income of $14.9 billion, which is more than the net income of Berkshire Hathaway. It's more than the net income of Amazon. It is truly a behemoth. It is more valuable than every single company in the German stock market combined. And people have been talking about this as a success story, and it undoubtedly is. But I wanted to ask you, basically, this is clearly a case of monopoly rents. Like, there's one game in town. It's Nvidia. No one else is making its chips. No one else is controlling its ecosystem. Everyone wants the H100. No one wants anything else. And this just does not seem healthy to me from a sort of capitalist perspective. There doesn't seem to be any competition here. And is something broken, and is there any hope that it might get fixed? Because the market cap certainly seems to imply that people are expecting this kind of level of profitability to last for a while.
Well, I think you're right in saying that this company has a tremendous amount of dominance as far as AI chips go. I mean, the Wall Street Journal just had a report that said it has 80% of AI chips. And this is an industry that is just booming out of control. I mean, you think about the companies that have been involved in AI and adding $1 trillion to their market cap, just because of their involvement has not been out of the question. There is competition, but it's going to take a while for that competition to actually be able to catch up with Nvidia. So you have companies like Amazon and Microsoft and Google making their own chips. The only thing is that it is very difficult to build the software. It's not just a hardware thing, it's a software thing as well. And it's very difficult to build the software that's going to enable developers to train large language models, as well as NVIDIA's software does. So the reason why they're so dominant is because they have this software and hardware combination. It doesn't mean it's impossible to challenge. Of course, other companies in Silicon Valley can build their own silicon. We've seen it happen. It's just a matter of being able to put that software and hardware combination together takes so much work that I think investors are right in thinking that this advantage for Nvidia is going to stay for quite some time.
And to be clear here, like Amazon, Google, and even Nvidia don't actually build their own silicon. TSMC makes all the chips, right? Nvidia's just designing them.
Absolutely. It's the design. But the design, you could argue, is the most important part of the value creation process. And that's why Nvidia is worth so much more than TSMC. Now, if TSMC went away tomorrow, it would be a real big problem for Nvidia. But ultimately, Nvidia is the one that's creating the intellectual property and the real value in the situation, whereas like TSMC is just building the actual chips.
How is it, given that TSMC has a monopoly on making these chips, how is it that TSMC's profit margins, how is it that it doesn't get to extract the same kind of monopoly rents that Nvidia can?
Yeah, you could argue that TSMC should be able to make more money off of this because it's not like, let's say, if you create garments, right, and you can sort of outsource that to a variety of factories. And so, I think TSMC, because they are the sort of the sole manufacturer of these chips, could potentially be able to extract more money from the designers of the chips. But I also think that it doesn't go for every chip. Right. So they would have to like decide, okay, you want to be a monopolist in this area, but not elsewhere. And then therefore, are you going to start to hurt your relationships with companies that are building or that you're building their technology for? And also like ultimately, we are already seeing that companies have seen this entrenchment that TSMC has, and they're working to build their own chip manufacturing facilities. Including Intel, which is trying to build one here in the US.
Bless Intel. Remember them? Remember when they were like a major chip maker?
It's interesting that you're calling Nvidia a monopoly because it's so early in the technology. It seems like it's not the kind of monopoly we're speaking about a week after the DOJ sued Live Nation saying it has a monopoly in the concert industry. And in the suit, they like lay out how it keeps the monopoly by doing all this kind of bad stuff and strong arming and retaliation and no. But in the case of Nvidia, we're talking about like they were smart enough to get into this before everyone else. They had the advantage and now they're sort of like reaping the benefit. And there's still, like Alex is saying, there are all these companies, big, giant tech companies trying to get in there and compete with them. So it's like an early stage monopoly. And it's like not the kind of monopoly where, Jonathan Kantor's going to be coming in any day soon. And then the other reason I think it's a different kind of monopoly is because, and this was in the journal, there's some estimate from Sequoia Capital that the industry put $50 billion into NVIDIA's chips to train the large language models. But so far, generative AI have only made about $3 billion in revenue. So there's a question of like, how long is this going to last? Like there's a lot of spending and NVIDIA is making a lot of money, but we still haven't seen like the big profit machine revenue maker.
There's a trade that every single capitalist will do every day of the week, which is spend $50 billion on NVIDIA chips and add $1.5 trillion to your market cap. Like that's like whether you're making any money from it, like right now in terms of revenue is like, so long as your value is going up and so long as your stock is going up, you don't care. And that's just deeply Silicon Valley.
But those bills will eventually come due. Like you can't go on spending on NVIDIA chips without an ROI forever.
And we should probably talk about that. Like, do you see the people who are spending on NVIDIA chips getting an R on their I? Like, I can definitely see, for instance, let's take Google as an example that has now started rolling out AI search results. I can see that those AI search results are arguably good for consumers, that you get to find out the answer to your question without having to click on the link and read a web page. And this makes it easier to, go about your day and find the information that you're looking for. I also can see that it massively increases the cost per search for Google. The cost of querying Google's database, if I just do a normal search, is a fraction of the cost of like running a whole new AI query when I do a Google search. And so like Google's costs are going up. Meanwhile, Google's revenues, I do not understand how this AI search result thing, which just gives me the answer directly on the Google page, helps Google's revenues at all. You know, like given that Google's revenues are like sponsored links where you're trying to send people away to click on someone else's website, it seems to hurt their revenues rather than helping it.
Well, Google is going to go through a number of years of hardship because of this AI thing. They're not going necessarily to AI now because they think it's a better product. They're just trying not to be disintermediated by AI search engines. They are a classic example of spending that money on the GPUs and seeing they're reaching all-time highs. So seeing the impact on their market cap without necessarily seeing the financing. I'll add another one. Meta, which is going to have, I think, 650,000 NVIDIA GPU or GPU equivalents by the end of this year. They've released an open source model, Llama 3, and they have put their AI assistant in every app. But it seems mostly to be annoying people at this point, and I don't think it's really translating directly into user value. And I think we're going to go through a moment now where all these companies will go to AI because they have to go to AI, and everybody needs an AI strategy because it's such impressive technology, but we're not quite sure what the application is yet. And my hunch is that we're going to see the application really show up in enterprise companies in the beginning, companies like ServiceNow, companies like Box, whose CEO, Aaron Levy, I just interviewed, and who's one of the most clear thinkers about where this technology is heading. The consumer applications are kind of questionable, even for me, spending $20 a month on ChatGPT, Anthropic's Claude. The application that I get the most use out of is professional versus consumer. Like I don't really use it for entertainment at all. Maybe sometimes to clear up like some question I have that isn't easily answerable with search. So we are going to go through this moment where it's going to be like, well, where's the cream filling? And some will find it and many won't. And there will be a correction here without a doubt.
Yeah, so I think one of the reasons why Nvidia is dominating the market now is that they were so early to produce graphics chips, and somewhat for industrial purposes or gaming or whatever. For that specific product, who are the closest competitors?
The answer to that one is you have some startups like Grok coming out, not Elon Musk's Grok, but another chip startup that's supposed to be able to do these processes faster than Nvidia can. The only problem is they don't have the actual software, or they do have software. It's just like, if you're going to switch off Nvidia software to run AI models, it has to be much better. The whole process has to be much better. You're not going to switch off for an incremental lift. And then there's also these big tech companies. You have companies like Facebook and Google, Microsoft, Amazon. This is from the Times talking about Nvidia's earning report. They're 45% of the company's data center revenue, so more than $10 billion. And so what's happening is they are a massive contributor to NVIDIA's bottom line, and they're going ahead now and trying to build their own chips and trying to offload some of the workflows that they have on NVIDIA chips to their proprietary stuff because it's cheaper. And then they can offer their services more cheaply to others. Then you have others like you have Intel is out there trying to build their own chips, and we'll see what happens on that front. But ultimately, like all these, like they call them accelerators, they're like kind of built out CPUs to try to do what a GPU does. They're just not really able to handle the training and the inference that NVIDIA chips can. And that's why NVIDIA's lead is cementing. And I just want to say one more thing about the monopoly thing before handing it back off. It's not illegal in the US to have a monopoly. It's illegal to maintain that monopoly with sort of anti-competitive tactics. And so I think right now we're seeing the market working in the way that the law intended, which is like NVIDIA is within its rights to go ahead and build this lead that it now has because it was right on timing and right on building the right things that people need. And now the market is going to give these companies like the Facebook, Google, and Amazons and the startups like Grok and the incumbents who, need a prayer to be able to save themselves like Intel to catch up. And they're going to have to find a way, whether that's building better technology or offering at a cheaper cost. And I do think the market will sort of work its magic and we'll find, either better technology or pricing coming down for the NVIDIA chips. But that could be 2 or 3 years, which in the grand scheme of technology is not that long of a time. Although NVIDIA investors are going to be really happy for, next couple seasons.
It is an important point that it's perfectly legal to have a monopoly. It's illegal to create a monopoly via merger. And this is what the Live Nation suit is about. They're basically, the DOJ is coming out and saying, we fucked up in 2010 when we allowed you to buy Ticketmaster.
It's saying that and that the company is illegally maintaining its monopoly.
And it's also doing anti-competitive things now that it's monopoly. But yeah, looking at what Nvidia is doing, it as you say, it is tying the hardware to the software. It is creating like data center services revenue along with silicon hardware revenue. And it's basically saying if you want to do one, you have to do the other. And it's doing a lot of these kind of tying things that I can kind of imagine, given the speed with which antitrust cases move, in many years' time, the DOJ might lumber along and say, this was illegal and you were tying these two things and we need to break you up into the hardware and the software or something like that. But you're quite right, for the time being, that doesn't seem to be in the cards. And the market itself is just looking at these insane margins that Nvidia has, the insane capitalization that Nvidia has, and says, like, we want some of that. And totally. maybe capitalism will work where the DOJ is just way too slow.
Yeah, and you don't hear developers complaining about NVIDIA's hardware-software integration. They love developing on this stuff.
Yeah, this is capitalism. It's not the bad kind, Felix. It's like company did good thing before everyone else did the thing, and now it's like reaping the benefit.
I still think that capitalism without competition is missing something vital. But yeah, I mean, like, you look at NVIDIA's market cap. If you are making $14.9 billion of net income on $26 billion of revenue, that kind of profitability is unheard of in basically the history of capitalism. I can't think of any other company that was that profitable ever. And if that is the case, and if you really believe that this monopoly was going to continue to be able to extract monopoly rents into the foreseeable future, Nvidia would be trading at much more than $2.5 trillion right now. It would be by far the most valuable company in the world. I think the market is pricing in the idea that it's not going to be able to maintain this level of monopoly for that much longer. Maybe, I think Alex is right, 2 or 3 years, yes, but like a decade, no.
Wait, but there is competition. It's just like, that's the dream of the capitalist, of the business owner, of the innovator, is like to make something amazing that no one else is making and everyone wants. And then that's how you spur the competition, because then your competitors want to make the amazing thing, right. That's all good. Your monopoly take is just really throwing me for a loop.
I mean, you do agree that it is a monopoly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but it's a natural monopoly. It's not a,
Is it a benign monopoly?
We didn't say that.
Benevolent
it's an organic monopoly.
If there's such a thing as a good kind of monopoly, like, this is it so far. Like, Apple maybe had a good monopoly at some point with iPhones, right? If we want to go back in time. Like, everyone was like, wow, that's the best thing. That's the best phone. I just want that. Like, they didn't
But they've never, Apple's always been, neck and neck with Android. And for a good portion of its history has been selling less than Android.
Always?
As long as Android has been around. But this is where the Felix nerd comes in and says, if there's only two companies in a market, like, for instance, mobile operating systems, then that is certain to be a monopoly. You don't need to have 100% market share or even 50% market share to be a monopoly. You can have 25% market share and be a monopoly.
Well, anyway, Nvidia has the dream monopoly.
It really does.
It's landed on free parking.
Monopoly's been bringing people together for almost 50 years. That's how long we've been wheeling and dealing together and going to jail together. Corner the market and utilities.
Selling a little or a lot? Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is a global commerce platform. It helps you sell at every stage of your business, from the launching your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit $1 million stage? Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. From their all-in-one e-commerce platform to their in-person POS system, whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. It helps you turn, as they say, browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout. It lets you sell more with less effort thanks to Shopify Magic. And, Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Wow. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/money, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/money now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/money. Reboot your credit card with Apple Card, the only credit card designed for iPhone. It gives you up to 3% daily cash back on every purchase. It's real cash that never expires or loses value. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app on iPhone. Apple Card issued by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, Salt Lake City branch. Subject to credit approval. Daily cash is available via Apple Cash Card issued by Green Dot Bank, member FDIC, or as a statement credit. Terms and more at applecard.com.
While we're on the subject of AI, we should talk about the sort of avatar of AI. The face of AI is not, weirdly, Jensen Huang, the CEO of Nvidia. It's Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI. And Alex, let's just start here by saying, like, how did that happen? Why did that happen? And does that make sense to you?
Think about all the people, all the researchers that have worked on AI breakthroughs. And you probably don't know their names because they were never quite good at productizing and selling what they had done, even within their own companies. And case in point is the fact that the transformer model that undergirds this entire AI moment was built within Google in 2017. And guess what Google did when that came out? They basically yawned. Like, some people were like, oh, that's interesting. But the researchers were unable to convince people within the company that this was a cool enough thing that it was worth building products on. And then when they finally did, they just didn't release them because I think they were afraid of them. And actually, Nvidia was the company that saw that paper come out and was like, we better build for this.
Yeah. Doesn't that imply that the person who ends up being the face of any new technology is really the founder / promoter who's doing the most to extract value from capital markets and promote the new product? And it's probably never going to be a researcher or somebody who's actually responsible for building the thing.
Yeah, that's like Steve Jobs, who's a marketer.
The people that will end up being the face of the industry are those that productize it and make it accessible for the masses. And yes, Steve Jobs with the iPhone. I mean, obviously there were technological advances that they made with the iPhone. I mean, you look at the iPhone compared to the other phones that were on the market at the time. I think I was like flipping with the Razor at the time, and I watched the introduction video and was like, this is amazing. This is a new era of technology. Like, same feeling with ChatGPT, where Sam Altman, our main character here, took this product and said, let's just turn it into a chatbot, and released it in a way that just blew people away. And honestly, it's not just ChatGPT, but it's also DALL-E, which is that image generator, which took stable diffusion technology that had been around and made it available to people and sold it to people. And that ability to productize and sell is the reason why we talk more about Sam than Jensen or any of the researchers on that transformer paper, because he is the one that saw what was, underlying this technology and productized it in a way that the masses could appreciate and really unlock the imagination of all these developers who ended up building on top of this. Like, this AI moment, even though the technology there was there, didn't really start until people got their hands on ChatGPT and said, well, what else can I use this for?
Okay, so for better or for worse, Sam Altman is the face of AI. He seems to be a little bit problematic. He was famously fired as the head of OpenAI for not being consistently candid with the board. Recently, he's got into a bunch of hot water, most famously with Scarlett Johansson, and it seems like he probably wasn't consistently candid in terms of the degree to which he wanted his chatbot to sound like Scarlett Johansson. And then more seriously, with his employees who are leaving the company, in terms of what he was asking them to sort of sign in terms of NDAs in order to be able to hold on to their equity and not have it clawed back. And he came out with a tweet basically saying, we would never dream of doing such a thing. And everyone's like, yeah. And I think it was Kelsey Piper at Vox. It was like, yeah, you're not really being consistently candid here, are you? We have the receipts. What's your opinion of Sam Altman as like a CEO, as who we expect to be telling the truth?
I think that he is consistently out there. He's willing to acknowledge mistakes, as he has before. He's extremely aggressive. And I think that the key component to Sam's story is the fact that he was the CEO of Y Combinator, which takes, impressive startups in and says, you have to supercharge what you're doing, teaches them to sell like crazy and to grow. And they take very aggressive tactics to do it. And that's controversial, but that's sort of the mentality that he's applied at OpenAI. I've spoken with him once. I found him to be like, very accessible, pretty candid. I don't know, which is hilarious given what people have been saying about him. But ultimately, these issues that people have with Sam are sort of like issues with the tech industry in general, right? You could sort of distill all these issues down to like this tech industry in general.
I feel like no one has these issues with Tim Cook. No one has these issues with Sundar Pichai, you know?
Oh, but I mean, come
they're
on.
Like second generation. Like they're not the classic startup CEO of yore, They're not. That's not who we compare Sam Altman
Sam's
to.
meant to be running a non-profit, for Christ's sake.
I mean, first of all, it's not really a nonprofit. Like we know that it's not a nonprofit anymore, even though they like have that nonprofit status. But like,
there's that not consistently candid thing again.
Go ahead. I would say this. Go ahead and try to speak about Apple, while you're an employee there, and see what Tim Cook does. It's not exactly going to be meeting you with a hug, right? I think all these companies have this value of secrecy. Go ahead and leak what's going to happen within Google in front of their I/O presentation, before it happens, and you're also toast. So they don't want their employees talking about anything. So that's like a normal thing. As a reporter, obviously, I don't like it. Like I'd much rather be able to hear everything as it's coming out.
I'm not sure that's the primary critique of Altman, though. I think, he recently disbanded the team that was working on long-term risk for AI after, in the beginning, early days, talking about that a lot and really getting the support of particularly the, EA effective altruism people who are really long-termist and worried about this stuff. And so those, what look like reversals, at least, look like a lack of being candid. Like, did he know that he was going to disband trust and safety? Sorry. Did he know that he was
super alignment?
Yes.
There's two ways to look at the disbandment of the super alignment team. One way is that, Altman saw that there were problems coming and decided to not care and basically put his foot on the gas pedal for this very dangerous technology in order to make money. The other way to look at it is basically he sees what he has, which is that these large language models are impressive, but largely stupid and maybe valuable in an enterprise context. And he had to basically decide about like whether he wanted to keep putting resources into a super alignment team that is looking for risks that just weren't there, or continue to put resources into the product. I kind of am more in the second camp, whereas that like, I'm not really afraid of what LLMs are going to do. I mean, there's definitely like ethical things that you have to check on, but I don't think that the existential risk camp carries a lot of weight right now. Whereas like, this idea that we're going to have super intelligence take off and these large language models will end up like turning us into paper clips. It's fun to talk about like on podcasts, but it's not really like a practical fear. And to me, that might have been the reason why he disbanded super alignment, or not really disbanded, but basically restricted the resources to far less than they anticipated. Although I'm open to the idea that, maybe there is greater risk and he just didn't want to hear about it.
One of the risks that I feel comfortable critiquing Sam Altman on is that it looks like OpenAI just hoovered in all the copyrighted content it could to develop its product without, any consideration to the intellectual property it was using.
Yeah, everyone knows they trained their model on YouTube, and they refuse to admit that they trained their model on YouTube.
Yeah, they're so cringy. And any interview, when you ask them about YouTube, they're like, no, we're not talking about that. It's like, you did, come on.
And that's a risk and a danger that we've discussed before in the podcast. And, beyond like the Terminator stuff that we like to talk about all the time. And those risks, I think the risks to the creator economy, to artists and novelists and journalists.
There is this talk right now about, I think it's called Search Zero or Google Zero, basically this idea that you can go to Google, type in what you want to find out, or even ask it in voice what you want to find out. It will tell you the answer to your question, and that it's no longer going to be driving traffic. You're not going to have to click on links and go to a different website in order to get the answer that you're looking for. And that's not an existential risk in terms of like humanity dying out, but it is an existential risk in terms of like a million businesses that are reliant on having people visit their websites. Is that something that you take seriously as a risk?
Oh, I do. I mean, so it's not an existential risk, like we're not going to all die because of it, but it is a serious risk. And when I said earlier that Sam Altman sort of embodies everything about Silicon Valley, this is like case in point, right? Which is that Silicon Valley just does not care about intellectual property rights at all. at all. So there's this controversy about like how the OpenAI ChatGPT voice sounds a lot like Scarlett Johansson, and Sam Altman tried to get her to voice the thing and she wouldn't do it, and they still made it sound like her. And when I saw that, I was like, wow, like Hollywood is now for the first time starting to feel a little bit of what the news publishers felt, which is that there's always a good explanation. Oh, we're just showing snippets. Oh, we're, we want to make your links available and send you traffic. But ultimately, this industry thinks about what's best for users. And that's why it's so popular in America. I mean, if you think about the approval ratings of the big tech companies compared to like the critiques in the media, it's unbelievable. Like you'd read some of these stories and you would think people hate Facebook and Amazon and Google, but they're like more popular than the military for some people.
This is why I'm convinced that AI search results are a genuinely disruptive technology and that people are going to like them. What we have seen in recent weeks is a bunch of people saying like, I Googled, can I eat rocks? And the Google AI said, yes, you should eat a couple of small rocks every day. Or I Googled, how do I stop cheese from slipping off my pizza? And the Google AI said, you add glue to it. Like, and people who are in the kind of journalistic or journalist adjacent world, so like, this is terrible. These results, if you're Google, need to be 100% trustworthy. Otherwise, like, all manner of terrible things will happen. And in reality, the way that disruption works is that people are happier with something a little bit lower quality that's just a lot easier. And if people see like a few glitches where the result is clearly wrong or something, they'll be like, yeah, well, that's clearly wrong. Or else they'll believe it and they'll go out and eat rocks and like bless those people.
There are going to be people that eat those rocks for sure.
There are going to be people who eat the rocks. And it's just people are going to be okay with that is my point, is that, if you look at the way that disruption works, the iPod disrupts the hi-fi business, not because it's higher quality, but because it's lower quality and just much more convenient.
Don't you think longer term, though, that hurts Google's credibility? Because, if you start...
it does. It does hurt Google's credibility, but it doesn't hurt Google's reputation. Like, people are going to be happier with an easier to use, slightly less credible Google than they are with the current.
I think not if they have to keep going behind it to see whether something's true, especially in high stakes scenarios.
Yeah, but the vast majority of times you use Google is not a high-stakes scenario. That's kind of the whole point. And the number of people who really care whether something is true is 0.5% of the population.
But here's why this is all kind of existential, right? People like Sam Altman, the tech industry itself, social media companies, they all devalue intellectual property, like Alex said. But
unless it's their IP.
Except their IP. So put in more relatable terms, they're devaluing like the truth, really. They're devaluing real reporting, real truth, real analysis, real facts. And as this has been happening, and this isn't just an AI thing, it's been happening for years. And as the media has become hollowed out, it's harder than ever to actually get the truth, to get those reported facts to the people. That is causing a lot of disruption and in the end might actually be rather existential, right? Because they've devalued essentially the truth in favor of what you're saying, Felix, just the expediency of like getting some answer, getting some chocolate chip cookie recipe, not like a good chocolate chip cookie recipe or whatever,
Yeah, this is related to the thesis of my book, right? Which was that we had this kind of halcyon period between 1945 and 2015 where we believed in things like truth, and truth was easy to obtain, and that was great. And now we're going back to where we were for the vast history of humanity, which is a world where truth is much harder to pin down and find.
And this man he's literally devaluing the truth. Like he's taking the IP without paying anybody.
Well, he's paying News Corp $250 million. Rupert's making out.
Congrats to Rupert.
To this point, society's been okay with it. Like, I don't think any of like the end users really got too mad about the end of news. Even if they were like, oh, my local paper isn't showing up, like they just put on Netflix. Here's the question though. What happens when this hits the entertainment industry? Because the entertainment industry is much more beloved than the newspaper. And I can tell you, Scarlett Johansson has way more fans than any journalist out there. And when they start stealing, her voice, or let's use the allegedly stealing and, more likely using someone who sounds a lot like her, That might help us determine where the line is here, because this ended up being a major mess up on their end, and they had to take the voice offline.
Didn't he learn anything from Bob Chapek's defenestration at Disney? Like, the first rule of running any company on the West Coast is never piss off Scarlett Johansson.
That's true.
I think that we're all talking about media scenarios. So you think about what the average person Googles on a regular day. News is a very small piece of it. A lot of times, if you have a new infant, the first thing you're Googling is, my child is bleeding from 3 orifices. What's the problem? What happens, especially when people need, yeah, I mean, you know what I'm saying. When people need information fast and they begin, looking at summaries that are produced by an AI that, by the way, is, putting new data into the data set that may or may not be accurate. And then that degrades the whole search experience over time. Like, so even aside from news and media and
Elizabeth, I feel like, every doctor in America will tell you, like, don't be trusting Google results anyway. Like, long before AI came along, like, we have lived in a world of terrible SEO optimized. Like, Googling what is wrong with your baby has been more likely than not to give you a very bad answer for years now, and it continues to give you a very bad answer. I feel like you are right on an absolute level. Like, this is probably a bad thing. I'm just not convinced that there's enough history and enough evidence that it is significantly worse than it used to be. Maybe the silver lining here is that people realize that the internet is a terrible place to go to find truth, and they go back to, like, asking their doctor instead.
Yeah, but you can never be sure. Depends on which doctor you ask.
The internet is useful for health information. You ever try calling your doctor to just ask a question? Good freaking luck. That's all we have is the internet for that
all
stuff.
We have. This is why we're all doomed.
Let's talk about AI a little bit. It gets a bad rap sometimes, but there are some places where it could come in super handy, like brain surgery.
Reboot your credit card with Apple Card, the only credit card designed for iPhone. It gives you up to 3% daily cash back on every purchase. Plus, Apple Card has no fees, not even hidden ones. Apply for Apple Card now in the Wallet app on iPhone. Apple Card issued by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, Salt Lake City branch. Subject to credit approval. Variable APRs for Apple Card range from 19.24% to 29.49% based on creditworthiness. Rates as of February 1st, 2024. Terms and more at applecard.com.
Slate Money is sponsored this week by ZBiotics. There's now a game-changing product to use before a night out with drinks. It's called ZBiotics. Let's face it, after a night with drinks, it's tough to bounce back the next day. You have to make a choice. You can either have a great night or a great next day. ZBiotics is a surefire way to wake up feeling fresh after a night of drinking. ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. ZBiotics produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make ZBiotics your first drink of the night, drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Go to zbiotics.com/money to get 15% off your first order when you use money at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/money and use the code MONEY at checkout for 15% off.
Having choices is good, and checking accounts are no exception. At Sandy Spring Bank, we have a variety of checking options and make it easy to choose based on your needs. Mobile deposits and payments, interest checking, or checking with no fees or minimums. Best of all, we'll help you select the account that suits your life. What's your next financial destination? Sandy Spring Bank. Visit sandyspringbank.com/checking. Member FDIC.
Let's move on because I want to ask Alex about the I don't even know if it's a social network, but it's certainly like the most popular social app in the world that no one in America uses, which is WhatsApp. WhatsApp is one of Facebook's one of Meta's three big apps on which that company is based. There's Facebook, there's Instagram, and there's WhatsApp. And you go anywhere on the planet and everyone is WhatsApping each other all the time. It is completely ubiquitous. And one of the things they do when they're WhatsApping each other all the time is they're leaving very long voice memos for each other. And instead of phoning someone, you just leave a long voice memo and then they listen to it and then they reply with their own voice memo and it goes back and forth. And this is like a completely standard form of communication in most of the world. And the United States is this weird outlier here. Americans in general don't use WhatsApp. And Elizabeth found a story that like the kids these days are beginning to start using voice memos, but it's still like relatively nascent. Tell us a little bit about how you think of WhatsApp and the way in which Facebook has somehow failed to make it take off in the United States.
Well, I would push back on that and say WhatsApp is starting to take off in the United States, and there's a handful of reasons about it. And I wrote about this actually earlier this year. So first of all, in 2023, WhatsApp grew daily users by 9%. That's according to Apptopia. So it has had some growth, not double digit, but it is growing there. And I think people more and more in the United States are seeing that WhatsApp is becoming, if not a dominant app for them, an app that they're using way more than they used to. And it's become an app where they like actually will chat with other Americans versus international folks. Here's a few reasons for that. First reason is that Apple has really opened the door for them, right? Apple has made their iMessage or Apple Messages, as it's called now, really not interoperable at all with Android. And this is something that is pushing people to an app that will just be interoperable across operating systems because messaging has become much more rich. We have reactions, we have video that we send through messaging, we have GIFs that we send through messaging. And you simply just don't want to chat with people on an app where that stuff is not going to be interoperable and it will come out awkwardly. So more people are saying, all right, let's just go on to WhatsApp. There's another thing that's happening there, which is that we're now all in these messaging groups. And again, like trying to go in a text message app to do that is really difficult, where WhatsApp is very good for that and has built custom functionality for it. And case in point on this one is parenting groups. And parenting groups are, people who are with kids in school. They will largely like get into WhatsApp groups because the group's messaging is better there. And then they'll start to communicate with the other parents that they're friends with in school. And they will be able to, start to chat with them with their WhatsApp account versus trying to move to text. They already have their WhatsApp contacts in there.
I will say that one area where WhatsApp is just a gazillion times better than Apple Messages is if you're in a group with someone who's not in your phone book, WhatsApp will tell you who a certain phone number belongs to, and Apple will not. And you're like, well, that's useful.
It's a great app. I think it's going to be the dominant messaging app in the United States, especially as more Americans travel internationally and use it to communicate with businesses. And, again, start to use some of these use cases. I don't think it's going to be long until WhatsApp is number one in the United States for messaging.
Wow, that's a bold prediction. And we like bold predictions here on Slate Money. Maybe we can come up with a wager about this one because I like winning wagers. I'm not sure I want to invite you back, to be honest, because you have now outed yourself as someone who says GIF, which means you are now dead to me.
Is it GIF? I worked at BuzzFeed. I should know this. I think it's GIF.
The guy who invented it says it's GIF, but that does not make any sense. It stands for graphic.
Yeah, I mean, I used to say GIF for years until I switched to GIF. But anyway, if that's going to be the end of my credibility, so be it. I'm GIF to the end at this point. I'm not switching back.
So give me a date, Alex. At what point do you think that WhatsApp is going to be the number one messaging app in the US?
Give me 5 years. 2029.
I will give you 5 years. All right. And now we just need to agree on stakes.
On like you did this to Ben Horowitz, right?
Yeah. To everybody.
All right. I'm down to bet stakes on it. Let's do it. 2029. WhatsApp is the dominant messaging app in the United States.
I will definitely take that bet.
All right.
What's the stakes?
You could just have Felix come on your pod and say, I was wrong, which is worth a lot.
That's pretty good. All right, how about this? The winner gets to go on the loser's show and gloat. That's pretty good.
There you go. That sounds like a plan. But let's not get derailed here because we want to talk about voice memos. Alex, do you think that with or without WhatsApp, if the US is moving towards WhatsApp as an app, it's the US also going to move towards this voice memo habit that the rest of the world has?
Yeah, I think it's going to happen. I mean, I like it when they transcribe the voice memos for you so you can like either decide to play it or read it because I'm that old school. But so my wife is German and a WhatsApp user, and all of her friends communicate via these long voice memos. And sometimes she'll like play them on like 3x and be able to understand what her friends are telling her.
Your German is just not that good.
Oh, no, I can't even understand it on 1x. So maybe by the time you come and gloat on my podcast, I'll be able to be fluent and get it on 2x. But I do think that this is definitely a way that people are going to want to communicate. It's definitely more efficient than typing things out. And once you start that habit, it's something that people are going to just continue to do versus like, for us word texters, it's a lot more difficult.
We're just old school. Elizabeth, you've been you found a story about this, right? That this is taking off among like the Zoomers.
Yeah, there was a Times trend story about the youth using voice messages far more now, and it makes sense to me on one level. But what's the sweet spot for a voice message? Because I think to me, it feels almost akin to voicemail whenever they start piling up in my inbox and I haven't had time to listen to them. So I feel like there's some way to do voice messages that's probably optimal and that the youth understand and I don't yet.
Well, the thing about the youth is they have more time. They have more time to listen to messages, listen to them on 3x, read the transcripts, God knows how many hours they spend on TikTok and Instagram and stuff. So it always starts with the youth at some point. But I do think you're right that it's not a time-saving thing. It's an effort-saving thing. It's just easier for many. Like it started in, I want to say, I might be wrong about this, but I think the first place where it really took off and where everyone started communicating via voice message was Indonesia. And at the time, the slightly snooty explanation was, well, Indonesia has a high illiteracy rate. And so if people literally don't know how to read and write, then they just communicate via voice message instead. But I think what people realized around the world quite quickly was that even if you do know how to read and write, it can be just a lot easier to talk into your phone than to try to sort of, for people who aren't like me, who just like write things down for a living all day, like it can be easier to just say
Well,
things.
one of the examples that was just completely blew my mind was that there are people who are using it where they'll aggregate all of their friends' voice notes from the day before and listen to them in the morning like it's a podcast or something and just get a download.
That's awesome.
Yeah, there was a whole thing about how we live in a podcast world now and you develop these parasocial relationships with podcasters. So why not develop the parasocial relationships with people you actually know? Maybe call them social relationships.
That's so odd.
I found it was a piece in the Washington Post, and there was someone saying like, well, voicemails are annoying, but voice memos are amazing. And I was like, I was feeling like very Andy Rooney about the whole thing. Just like, because I like talking on the phone and voicemail. I didn't dread it, but there came a time in the culture when it was no longer socially acceptable to leave a voicemail. It was like considered rude almost. Like, I saw you called. You don't need to tell me you called in the voicemail. And people were like, it's so exhausting to listen to the voicemail. We hate the voicemail. That's only an old person thing. And now it's 2024 and all those people are doing voice memos, trying to argue that they're somehow very different from voicemail. I don't think so. It's the same thing. It is the same thing.
Maybe voicemails obligate you to do something, in return. You generally are supposed to call somebody back, at least. And with voice notes, you can just listen to them.
Wait, no, they obligate you to listen to it. Like, there's that whole thing of like, I don't listen to my voicemails, which is very sort of passive aggressive, because the idea, if you spend all of the effort leaving someone a voice message, is you expect them at the very least to listen to it.
But now they transcribe those too. Like Alex was saying about the voice memos. You also get the transcribed voicemail. Like,
this is why I think there's real ROI with AI. It's because it will write down the voice memos. We've solved it.
the only people who leave voicemails anymore are like your doctor, you know, like something bad you owe on a bill. Like no one would dare send you a voicemail that's just your friend and wants to talk. So it's become even worse over on voicemail land. So they just had to pretend that something new is happening with the voice memo, but
But it's voicemail.
It's voicemail.
Come
on.
It's just much faster than voicemail, and
It is
it's
faster.
not. And voicemail is always. It's never intended. No one ever phones someone up with the intention of leaving a voicemail.
Did you live through the 90s? Of course. You were like, I'm going to call now because I know they're not home. And then you leave a message. You're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry I missed you.
Emily's revealing all of her secrets
Alex
now.
has never been a teen girl. He doesn't understand.
That's what it is.
It's true. It's true. Guys, can we have a numbers round? Elizabeth, do you have a number?
So my number is 85,000, and that's dollars, and that's the upper limit of salary that the Biden administration or the Biden campaign will pay their new meme lord that they want to hire in Wilmington, Delaware, to just manage Biden-related memes. And there was a lot of mockery around this, but I think it's actually a good idea, especially given that if you look at Biden merch sales, the dark Brandon meme stuff has been really popular. And I feel like there's some asymmetry where Trump supporters kind of create all these memes on their own, but Biden supporters don't. And so having somebody in-house to think about that is probably a good thing. But I also understand why it's getting lots of mockery.
The dark Brandon stuff is popular? Who is
Massively.
buying that stuff?
I think it's the highly engaged people of a certain age that are just amused that, you know, traditional Democrats or even understand what a meme is, much less something that's a tiny bit edgy.
Emily, do you have a number?
I do. It's 17.7 million. That's the number of daily or near daily users of cannabis. And it has
I love this story. Yeah.
It has outpaced the number of daily or near daily users of alcohol, which is only 14.7 million. And this is like a big change. There was a study that came out a little earlier this month in the journal Addiction. And it's just a sign of what we were talking about a few weeks ago of legalization. More people are doing this now. And it's a really big change. And I feel like it needs to be studied more, like the differences in culture. And this is a big deal. Although to be sure, overall, people still drink more alcohol. This is just near daily and daily users.
My number is 4th. Is that a number? Is it an ordinal? Maybe just 4. And specifically the 4th of July. Emily, do you know why the 4th of July is important?
It's the day we bested your former home country.
Alex, do you know why the 4th of July is important?
Long weekend.
Elizabeth, do you know why the 4th of July is important?
I don't know, but I feel like it's specific to you.
It is not. It is specific to 60 million people. 4th of July is the day that Britain goes to the polls. It is the general election in the UK. It has been called by Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, in what was undoubtedly the worst announcement of a general election campaign and an election that has ever been seen in the history of democracy. He just walked out in front of 10 Downing Street in the rain without an umbrella, and while all of the rain was falling on him, he was like, we're going to have a general election. And then at the end of 10 Downing Street, a bunch of pranksters started playing Things Will Only Get Better by D. Ream, which was like the Tony Blair anthem, over the top of what he was saying. And it was just a shit show. Anyway, this is going to mark the end of 14 consecutive years of Tory rule. And so everyone in the UK is quite excited about this. And it happens, as Americans will appreciate, on the 4th of July. And unlike in America, where you have an election and then nothing happens for 2.5 months, and then eventually you get an inauguration, it happens the same day. Like the following day, 5th of July, he's going to move out of 10 Downing Street and Keir Starmer is going to move in, and that's going to be the end of the Tories.
Why would he call the early election if he's going to lose?
Alex, there are very, very many English politics podcasts that have spent many, many hours trying to answer this question. But my favorite theory is that what he really wants to do is just move back to California with his kids and get them into school for the beginning of the school year in California.
I love that. That is amazing.
I respect that.
Alex, bring us home. What's your number?
My number is 427%. That is the rise in Nvidia data center revenue from a year ago in a quarter to $22.6 billion. And
so
as Aaron
can you
Levy,
just explain this
Yeah.
to me? What is the difference between a data center and just an H100? Or is that the same thing?
the H100 is included in that category. And what Aaron Levy, the CEO of Box, says, looking at the 427% increase in the 22.6 billion absolute numbers, he goes, these two numbers have never been next to each other in the history of capitalism.
This is a off the charts company in so many ways. Alex Kantrowitz, thanks so much for coming on. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me. And it was great having you guys on my show.
Yeah, it was fun coming on yours too. We will do this again sometime. Many thanks as well to Ben Richmond and Cheyna Roth and Jessamine Molly and Jared Downing and everyone at Slate. And many thanks to all of you guys for writing in on slatemoney@slate.com. We will be back next week with more Slate Money. But yeah, let us know if you have a better stakes for Alex Kantrowitz, for whether for the bet or whether it's just going to be like a podcast appearance. Find out next time he's on the show. Thanks for listening to Slate Money.
At Grand Canyon University, we believe in equal opportunity, and the American dream starts with purpose. Whether your pursuit involves a bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degree, GCU's learning environments are designed for supportive networking and collaboration. With over 330 academic programs, GCU provides a path to help you fulfill your dreams. The pursuit to serve others is yours. Find your purpose at GCU. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu.